Hello everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Weaving Worlds. Today's topic is a question that every speculative fiction author needs to answer, whether they consciously ask the question or not. Are your setting rules hard or soft? Do you plan your setting's future science or magic down to the details, or do you just plan to wing it? The decision you make on this can have a big impact on what kind of audience you draw, or at least what they expect of you, not to mention how you spend your time when designing your setting. The difference in the details. When you make a setting that features hard science fiction or a hard magic system, you stick as close to reality and logic as possible. You research real science and scientific theories. You create plausible systems for how impossible things like faster-than-light travel and faster-than-light communication works. And you create a set of rules that every future device or every magic spell has to follow. And while you may not create every rule before you start writing your stories, you will never intentionally break a rule after you introduce it. When you create a soft science fiction or fantasy setting, everything is a little more up in the air. If you want your setting to have faster-than-light travel, then it does. And the reason it does is because your story calls for it. That's it, you're done. If you want laser guns to exist because you think they're cool, then sure, throw them in. If you want Mars to be inhabited by humanoid aliens, then go for it. Who cares what the scientists say? If you think wizards should throw fireballs, then they do. Absolutely. And if later on you come up with an idea that contradicts something you wrote earlier, then maybe someone was just wrong before. Don't worry about it. Audience appeal. Hard and soft settings have different ways of appealing to their audiences. Hard settings provide the audience with extra realism, and that realism can help the audience feel like this is a place they could actually go. This is a world that, under certain conditions, could actually come to pass. A bigger factor is that hard settings are rewarding to audience members who want to dig beneath the surface, who want to engage with the setting by asking questions about how things work. In a hard speculative fiction setting, all of these questions have answers, and the discovery process can really reward an audience member's curiosity. A soft setting isn't tethered to any rules or restrictions, not as many as a hard setting anyway, and so instead what you have is a realm of endless possibilities. There isn't much to a soft setting once you scratch the surface, but what's beneath is fluid and can take any shape you like. Instead of discovering rules, the audience can invent their own and fill in the gaps with their own imaginings. Soft settings invite fan fiction and fan theories on how the world works, and so they don't reward curiosity so much as they reward creativity. Research requirements. When you compare the hard and soft speculative fiction settings together, the hard settings seem to demand more research. And you'd be right, but the difference between the two settings isn't as strong as you might think. Soft settings still demand some research on the creator's part, and you don't always need a college degree to write a hard speculative fiction setting. For one thing, a soft setting still demands at least a veneer of plausibility. For instance, how come nobody ever heard of the Oompa Loompas in Willy Wonka's chocolate factory? Well, it's because he found them in a distant corner of the globe and invited all of them to live in his factory without going through immigration. So how come nobody knows what's going on in the factory? That's because Wonka has refused to let anyone inside until the events of the book begin. How come Luke can't use the Force to make Jabba the Hutt give up Han Solo? It's because the Jedi mind trick only works on people with weak minds, and as a crime boss, Jabba has a lot of willpower. Examples like these are easy enough to understand, but creating the veneer of plausibility can also sometimes require research if you want to sound reasonable to your audience. Star Trek The Next Generation is famous for coming up with technobabble solutions for the crisis of the episode, and the way it worked is that the script writers would put the tech in their scripts and then have a science consultant fill that section in with vaguely related scientific words. You can do the same thing for your stories. But unless you have your own science consultant, you'll have to do some of your own research to get those words you need. As for the hard setting, you don't have to research exhaustively and develop every layer of your setting before you start writing stories in it. Instead, you can research as you go, developing just enough of your setting to write your story, and then expanding it as you keep adding to it. You'll need to start with more information as a hard setting creator, and you'll need to stick with the rules you set, even if that means that certain stories and twists are impossible. But even so, you don't need to completely flesh out your settings before you start using them for stories. Development speed. The extra research needed for a hard speculative fiction setting will definitely slow you down compared to a soft setting, but then research is never the biggest time consumer when it comes to writing. The writing is. Everyone has their own process and their own writing speed, and it can change depending on whether you're writing for the page, the screen, the stage, or the Game Master screen, but that process will always take more time than your research will. Guaranteed. So if you're worried about the time it'll take to learn about science, medieval history, religion, magic systems, or whatever else you need, don't. Writing your story will always take longer. The benefits of restrictions. Another reason why a creator might shy away from designing a hard setting is because you are effectively handicapping yourself. If you stick with real science, then you won't be able to write a story about expansionist Martians. And if you design a hard magic system, then your wizard character won't be able to come up with whatever spell your protagonist needs. This can be a problem, certainly, but it can also be a way to inspire you to come up with all kinds of clever new ideas. Consider this. Your protagonist needs to explode a room for some reason. If you had a soft magic system, you could just say that the protagonist's wizard companion casts Fireball, and that's the end of it. But what if your magic system doesn't allow you to throw fireballs? What if all the energy for the explosion has to come from somewhere? Now your characters will have to get creative if they want the room to explode, or they'll fail, and the story will head off in an unexpected direction. Creating a hard setting is like giving yourself a bunch of writing prompts. Sometimes they might stump you, but in general, they're a good way to get your creative juices flowing. Story focus. How central is the science or magic to the story of your setting? Is it a backdrop for a story that could be told in any setting? Is it a device that your characters use that can fit whatever purpose you need? Or is the function of magic or science the whole point of the story? In the first case, a soft setting works best. In the second case, soft or hard settings will work. And in the last case, you need a hard setting if you want your audience to keep up with the story you're telling. Golden Age science fiction frequently features science and technology as both the problem and the solution of the story. For instance, in Isaac Asimov's Runaround, a robot malfunctions because it hits a balancing point between the second and third laws, and the solution is to invoke the first law since that overrules both of the others. But for that to make any sense, there needs to be 3 laws of robotics. And so Asimov invented them for the story and then used them to create more story ideas in dozens of other short stories and novels. As a counterexample, the Harry Potter books feature a wizard school and all kinds of spells and enchanted items, but it glosses over all the classroom discussions, and instead J.K. Rowling invents new spells and devices and restrictions only when they intersect with the story. She's usually careful not to contradict a fact she invents in a previous book, but it's fairly clear that magic in Harry Potter can do whatever the story needs it to. The setting Bible. Choosing a soft speculative fiction setting doesn't free you from the laws of cause and effect, and it doesn't mean you get to change all of your own rules on the fly. You can bend your rules, you can cheat with rules, and you can come up with new explanations that account for the plot twists you want to add, but you can't break your rules once you introduce them to your audience. If you do, the logic of your setting falls apart, and you won't be saved by crying, "It's magic, I don't have to explain anything." As such, whether your setting is hard, soft, or somewhere in between, it's always a good idea to create a setting Bible. A setting Bible is a collection of all the information that defines your setting. a reference that you can check whenever you forget a detail about how magic works, or you aren't sure where a character was supposed to be at a given time. Your Bible could be a pile of disorganized notes, a carefully hyperlinked PDF complete with an index, or a rambling story explaining what's happened in the years between the present and the future you depict. You might put most of the Bible together before you begin your first story, or you might expand it considerably between every story you create. But no matter what it looks like or how you use it, a setting Bible can be incredibly helpful when it comes to making your setting consistent. Thanks for joining me again for today's journey into Weaving Worlds. Please like, share, and subscribe because that raises my visibility here on YouTube. Check out my other stuff if you have some time, support me on Patreon if you have some money, and I hope I'll see you again for the next video.